Thank you, guys. Yes, my small hobby farm has been quite exciting. My husband has always been a farmer since I married him, but he's always had the farm away from our house. So, you know, he went to the farm. I didn't have the farm in my backyard. And then recently, this last year, he decided that he wanted our girls to experience farming a little more intense. And in order to do that, he didn't want to have to be running them over to the farm every morning to do chores. So we have 6 steers, or small, they're not steers yet, they're still small little calves. And then we have 6 chickens, which we went through a chicken travesty. So if you don't know, raccoons really like chickens. And we learned that lesson the hard way. So yes, I drive up to my driveway now, and I have chickens that run to my car because they're very excited to see us at the end of the day. So
this is your new office?
This is my new office. Yes, the chickens come to my new office. So it's kind of it's neat. It's interesting too. So when I did my research, I was working for South Central Michigan Works, and I worked there for 17 years. I know. I was 12 when I started, so that kind of explains why I don't possibly look like I could have worked there 17 years. It was pretty much the majority of my career that I worked there, and I started at the very, very bottom. I started at the very entry-level position, just helping people on computers when they would come in. And when I resigned back in July, my last day was in July, I was working as the president of the organization, so which I did for 4 years prior to leaving. So I really wanted to, it was starting to get very political with my job, but I really wanted to be a mom. You know, I have 2 little girls, and they're 6 and 8, and they're not getting any younger. And those of you who are parents know that those years are very fleeting with your children. So I just kind of had, one of those wake-up calls where I was like, I have tons of time in my life to do these things. This is the time now for me to be a mom to my kids. So I was very happy that God provided the ability for me to be able to do that. But now I get to do something different, and I like challenges. I love being challenged. So that's probably why I decided to go back and get my master's degree while I had 2 small children at home, and I worked an extremely demanding job. So if that's not a challenge, I don't know what is. And especially when we were doing like statistics and the accounting class. I'm not trying to deter anybody, but I'm telling you what, there may have been a few times where I cried when I was doing accounting, and it takes a lot to make me cry. So.
Okay, when we grade them, we cry too.
Okay, well that's good.
And I'm a research design prof, and I have statistics in my stuff, and I totally understand what you're saying.
I actually found the statistics to not be as bad as the accounting. The cost accounting just killed me. And that's when my husband, who is actually a math whiz, he can do long division in his head, it's amazing. But when I had him helping me, so I'm like, you have to help me with this, I don't know what I'm doing. And he finally got up from the table and put his hands up, he's like, I'm not the one getting my master's degree, and he walked away. So he was done at that point. So just the fact that I was able to survive that class made me feel good about my life. When I worked at Michigan Works, one of the things that I noticed is the communication in the workplace. We struggled with that a lot. When I first took over as president, it'll be getting close to about 5 years ago from this time. When I first took over as president, I noticed that we had 3 offices in 3 different locations, which makes communication even more difficult. So it's hard enough if you're in one workplace. I mean, with our small propane office, there's only 5 employees. So my husband and I are 2 of those employees. But even with those other 3, we find that it's hard to communicate, even in that small little office sometimes, because everybody communicates differently. People like to receive information differently. And at Michigan Works, it was no different. And it was even more complex because we had 3 separate locations. So we had a location in Hillsdale, 1 in Jackson, and 1 in Lenawee. And our Hillsdale office was, of course, our smallest, but still important nonetheless. And then our Adrian office was a slight bit bigger, and our Jackson was pretty much our main office. So we kind of, when I started focus on what I was going to do for my presentation and for my thesis, I really thought about what we could do to improve the communication in the workplace, because I knew that was a big struggle. So we had several symptoms throughout the organization. So frontline staff were displaying behavior that they were not always certain how to complete their tasks. That was one of the issues that we faced. There was increased absenteeism. When I first took over, there was a lot of individuals who would just call in sick for no reason. They weren't sick, they were calling in sick. And then we would have people that, in my opinion, and I know I'm probably being unfair or an ogre, but they were abusing the FMLA ability that they had, you know, those types of things. So those were a couple of things. And we were noticing that even though we were trying to use more modern communication methods, it wasn't necessarily improving. So we had put some phone system software in place that would let people chat. It's kind of like having it's a chat room through the phone system. So that was what we thought would help with some of the issues, and it didn't. But let's see. So the research question for my project was, how can changes in communication methods help to create a positive workplace culture? I'm a people pleaser by nature. I don't like people to be unhappy. It makes me uncomfortable. You know, I'm always telling my kids, let's not fight with each other, you know, whatever. So to me, it was very frustrating to come to work every day and see all these people in disarray all the time. And let's just get along. You have to work together every day. So one of the benefits that I could see of this study was that discovering the patterns that worked best for everyone. So like I said, everyone communicates differently. So what patterns would work best for them? Finding out exactly and narrowing down where that breakdown was actually occurring. So we know that there's a problem with the communication. At what point are we having the issue? Finding different ways that it's being received by staff. So I think I'm communicating well to them, but at some point they're not feeling that way. And then understanding the perception throughout the organization. So as a whole, how did everybody feel, and what was their opinion of the way that communication would take place in the workplace? The conceptual framework kind of looked like this. We talked about communication strategies, how they would be identified by the staff. Goal-directed, managers would establish communication goals for them. So, okay, this is now what we're going to do as part of that. Communication goals are then discussed with the staff. So they would be talking to the staff saying, okay, so you're saying that this is how you prefer to communicate, so this is how we'll move forward with you. And then staff begin to engage with those new communication methods and then observing them to kind of see where their satisfaction level was in regards to communication in the workplace. So for this research, I used a qualitative research approach and used an in-person survey method. And you know, when I presented this research to my board of directors, one of my board members brought up a very interesting and something I hadn't thought of, but I did a qualitative and he said, actually, Sarah, you did a quantitative as well, you just don't realize it. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, part of my job as president, they would evaluate me twice a year, and they sent out, talk about nerve-wracking. I mean, it's bad enough you have to be president of an organization, but all those 50 people that work for me get to put their say in on how I'm doing. So twice a year, every spring and every fall, they would be surveyed by my executive board and asked how I'm doing as president of the organization. They had very specific questions. I think they had to answer like 15 different questions about me. Am I following the guidelines of the mission statement? Am I personable? Am I approachable? You know, just basic things like that. So he made a point, which I didn't really think about. I would always get to see the results. I'll be quite honest with you. There's times they made me cry because you feel like you're working as hard as you can to please these people and they're still not happy with anything you're doing. What I had to learn to do was look at my survey results, kind of notate the areas where I need to work on, and then put it away and never look at it again. So, lesson learned after the first year, because I had a really bad Christmas one year because all I thought about was how awful I was as a boss. And so he was explaining to me, he goes, don't you remember how well your results, like quantitatively, looked each time once you started making some of these changes? And I'm like, that is true. So there was a quantitative piece to it as well. It's just not something that I documented. So I took 6 staff. I did 2 administrative level, 2 mid-level, and 2 frontline staff. Interview questions were examined in between each interview. So I would sit down, I'd have that person, and I tried to take them off-site. I didn't want them to feel apprehensive about the environment that they're in. I didn't record. I recorded it with my phone, but I felt bad, honestly, because I felt like they thought that I was going to come back and get them or something for something they said. So that was an uncomfortable part of one of the pieces that I did. But I noticed that if I took people away from the environment, they tend to be more truthful with me and provide me deeper information. I think it did help that I had worked really hard during my years throughout the organization to create good relationships with a lot of the individuals. So when I did go to take them out for lunch or whatever it was that we did, it wasn't like I want something from you type thing. They knew that that's just generally my nature to have that kind of environment. So I also took time to review 3 different main materials that we use within our organization, which was the employee manual, policy manual, and our staff communication materials. So that would be, for example, like if you're getting a write-up, like what does that look like? What do those documents contain in them? So these were the interview questions that I asked. The first one was describe the way that you communicate with your coworkers, what works best and what does not. And it was funny, I get, some people would just give me one-word answers, which, you know, I think you helped me too when we were examining some questions, like how can we open this up a little more. So we talked a little bit about what they thought worked best, and I was very surprised by people's answers to some of these. I also made sure that my audience was very diverse, so not just getting older workers, not just getting younger workers, not just getting middle-aged workers, and also getting people from a variety of stages within their time. Excuse me. People that had just started, people that had been there for a while, trying to mix it up a little bit. Talking to them about which communication methods they thought were the best. When they might want more communication from us, when we weren't communicating enough. Our organization was going through a lot of change at the time. We had went from, excuse me, we went from where we were all contracted in, we used to have contractors within our centers, to when I started my presidency, which was another challenging thing. Oh yeah, let's get someone new to be the president, and let's change the entire way we run this organization at the same time. That was fun. So that was such a life-changing experience for me. But one of the things they changed was nobody was our contractor anymore. Everybody was our employee. So no more did we have, for example, Jackson College as a contractor. We didn't have HRDI as a contractor. Everybody became my employees, which made it easier to enforce change, I felt, having seen both sides of it. But it did create kind of some issues where we weren't really familiar. You know, their previous employer communicated them with them one way, we don't communicate that way. And that was frustrating to some individuals. I wanted to know how they communicate with their supervisor. How do they find that effective? Was there something they would like to see their supervisor do differently with them? One piece that was always important to me, because I've had some wonderful supervisors in my life, but I've also had some bad ones. And we all know that that's how you grow as an employee, really. And so I wanted to know, are our supervisors doing enough to bring these individuals up in the right way throughout the organization? I want them to talk to me a little bit about how we had helped them change communication methods, and have they helped their job? Have they made it worse? So we changed the way we did some things when we became direct delivery of services. Is that been beneficial for you? Are there some things that we did that now make it more challenging for you to do your job? Let's talk about that. Talk about how the feedback that they receive from their supervisor, is it helpful to you? Is it hurtful to you? Or is it just do you not care? Because I had some that when I interviewed them, I kind of felt like they didn't care. So that was interesting. Where might the organization benefit from increasing their communication with the staff? So those were all really great questions that helped open up the conversation. It amazed me, especially from the young individuals that I interviewed, because I know for me, I kind of prefer to text people. I know my husband tells me he thinks it's crazy because I tend to be very social and outgoing when I'm in groups, but when I get home, I don't really want to talk to anybody on the phone. I will text you, but I really don't want to have a phone conversation with you. It's like my downtime, I think. So I was surprised that the majority of people, they said that the face-to-face communication was the most important for them. Verbal communication, because of the fact, for a lot of different reasons, but body language. You know, somebody sends you an email, and this I battled all the time as an employer. It was so frustrating when you have to tell people, Now, is that really what they said to you, or is that how you interpreted what they said? You know, email was nasty. Well, you say it was nasty. Did you read it in a nasty way, or was the email actually nasty? You know, so people talked a lot about how they preferred the face-to-face method because they could really tell if the person, are they irritated with me? Are they being honest with me? I mean, is the person really being truthful with me in how they communicate? The email misinterpretation, which I just kind of talked about, I also had other people say, well, you know, phone calls aren't as bad, but you know, so-and-so hung up on me. And it's like, well, did they hang up on you? Or did they think the conversation was over, so they hung up the phone? I mean, there's a lot of misinterpretation that can occur in those situations. So as going through the study, looking and identifying at some of the limitations from the research, I gotta make sure I talk fast. So I just wanna make sure I'm not talking too fast. As myself being the president and interviewing the individuals, I really felt like they may not give me honest answers. But that is why when I chose who I chose to interview, I was very particular because I wanted to make sure I was choosing individuals who I felt would give me honest answers, regardless of who I was within the organization. And to some point, I got that more than what I bargained for with some individuals. So I had some people that were just blatantly honest with, which is what I wanted, so it was good. And also that the work environment, as I said, I didn't want to do it in my office. I had one person that said, well, can we just do it in your office? Because I don't want to go out to lunch. And I'm like, well, we don't have to go out to lunch. Let's just go somewhere, but I don't want to do it in my office. So trying to make sure that we weren't making them feel as though this is, I wanted them to also know that this isn't part of a work thing. This is something I'm doing outside of work. This is separate from my daily job. It is going to benefit work, but it's not for that reason. So coming out of it, there were some recommendations that I made to my board, who I presented this to, but they should investigate trainings that assist staff in understanding communication preferences, because what I noticed, and it kind of reminded me of that, you know, in marriage, they talk about the book, The Love Languages. So what's your love language? How do you communicate? Because we all know that's really where a lot of issues start in a marriage, is miscommunication. My husband and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, you must communicate, because I'm not a mind reader. I can't read your mind. You got to tell me what's going on. And that's kind of what I felt like was going on with some of the staff is, you know, because I had an individual that said this to me, well, I just don't like email. And I wish people would just pick up the phone and call me. So I'm not going to read their email. Okay, well, email is part of the daily work life. It's just going to happen. So we have to figure out how you can be comfortable in how you communicate, but also they can too. So in that instance, we talked about to those individuals, okay, so call so-and-so, but if for your comfort level, follow up with an email. Because then I'd have people say, well, I like email because then I have record that I said such and such to so-and-so on this day at this time. And I said, got it. So he wants you to call him. And then when you get off the phone, send him an email and say, as per our conversation, blah, 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 blah. Holding staff trainings twice a year. One of the things I thought was especially important was taking time, since we were separated, to get together so that we could kind of feel like a family. Because I think once you become more connected to your coworkers, you're more understanding, and you can tend to develop those relationships that bond you together a little bit more. So the state would give us 2 times a year that they would allow us to close down for trainings. So the previous president never utilized those because they didn't want to close the offices. So we picked 2 times a year that we thought would be low traffic days. We would close our offices, and we would get together for trainings, and we would do different things. So sometimes I did trainings. I did have an individual come and train on some communication methods. I had someone come in and talk to people about stepping out of your comfort zone and doing things that you are kind of afraid of, because I saw that with staff. I noticed that there were people that had it within them to do a certain job, but they were just too afraid to take that lead. Utilizing smart board technology, we started doing this when I was leaving. We had smart boards put in every center, and then we could kind of have staff meetings between like specific groups. So if it was our PATH group, they could interact with the other PATH members in Jackson and Hartzler without them having to drive all the way to those locations to do that training. And then establishing a quarterly schedule for me to go out to each service center. And this was probably one of my favorite things to do, but it was a time-consuming thing for me to do. I had to block off a whole day, which at that time could be challenging for my schedule. And I would go around and I'd spend 2 hours with the staff at each center. So we just rotate people to come in. So so-and-so is going to come and cover an Adrian so that I can sit down with all the Adrian staff at one time. And we can just kind of talk about what's working, what's not. They can talk to me about anything. And I found that to be extremely helpful because then I'm more than just the president. I'm a person to them and I care about them. And I would get people that would send me text messages and emails on the weekend, even though I didn't really like it sometimes. It was nice to know that they felt comfortable enough that if there's an issue, they can come to me and talk to me about what's going on. So this was probably, even though I know that the person who's taken over now, one of the things that they told me is frustrating is that he doesn't do this. And they missed that because that communication, they felt like they were part of the organization. They got to help make some of the decisions that move the organization forward. And then kind of looking at team building opportunities within the community. I would allow staff to be involved in whatever things they wanted to, junior achievement, whatever, and they would get to take so much time away from their actual work day or work month in a month's period of time to participate in those things. And I felt like that helped out a lot as well because it gave them it helped them feel like we were allowing them to be someone other than just what they were when they came into the workplace. For future research, identifying workplace communication preference based upon the work environment. So how does communication in a manufacturing environment differ from that of an office environment? Because I'm sure it does. So you might not be able to take these findings that I came up with and implement them into a manufacturing facility. You may have to reevaluate that. Look at the communication technology that can be utilized in the workplace. What's the most cost effective? Not everybody's going to be able to put a smart board into their workplace. I know with my husband, when I first took over running the office of the propane company, I came in the first day and I'm like, you cannot have a one-line phone system. This is craziness. Like, how did you function for all these years before I came along with this? And they did not have email. Like, the secretary was using her personal Gmail account for things, and it just drove me crazy. So one of the first things I did was got a multi-line phone system and created our Green Energy LP at live.com email. It was crazy to me that someone could function that way, but not every technology piece will work. So my husband's not going to obviously buy a smart board, but buying the multi-line phone system, that was a huge purchase for him, and he was scared about doing it, but now he's happy because it's helped with communication. I just have to get him to stop using that button where he can sit at his desk, which is only feet away from me, and inter-office intercom me. That's very annoying. So once I can get him to stop doing it, it's like a kid with a new toy. It's ridiculous. And also investigate the impact that cultural differences have. So could those cultural differences play a factor in how communication occurs? Because we know that does affect it in sometimes. So, kind of talked about this as I was talking, but the staff trainings, like I said, were well received. I noticed that when we first started doing those 2 times a year staff trainings, that would be like, I gotta go to the staff training. And then by the time I left, the last one that we did together, it was like the most, I think we had the most, because I tried to make them mandatory, like you cannot take this day off. We would tell people, because I would set the day 6 months in advance, and I'd say, you cannot take this day off unless someone is dying. It's got to be a really serious instance. And the first time I noticed people would come in and they're like, attitude, I don't want to be here. Then it got to where people would actually email me suggestions. Oh, when we do our next training, could we have a training on this? Because I would really love that. And then we kind of incorporated some staff, because we weren't allowed to do Christmas parties, but we kind of threw those in there too, and that kind of helped a little bit, make people more excited to come. The quarterly visits, like I said, the shared learning. And for me, I know that I had a lot of people say for them it was very encouraging because they were getting information. I would tell them as much as I could. It was a very scary time too for a lot of the staff because we were being, when I was there, Hillsdale Jackson Lenawee, and we were being merged with Washtenaw and Livingston County Michigan Works offices. And it was scary because people didn't know if they were going to get to keep their jobs, who's losing their jobs, who's not losing their jobs. And I just spent a lot of time, I'd sit down and I'd just tell them everything I could, because I didn't want to be dishonest, so I didn't want to tell them, oh, you're all going to have a job. So I just tell them, I can't tell you that. But being able to sit there in front of them and have those heart-to-heart conversations, they knew that I was telling them as much as I could. It did help ease some of that tension during that time. Like I said, emails are okay, but they wanted that actual communication. So I would send out emails every other week to kind of get people updated on what's going on organization-wise. And then I would go around and do my quarterly talks. And people really enjoyed that. And I'd have people that called me if they still had questions about certain things. But they really liked the face-to-face communication. And we tried to make it possible so that individuals could do more face-to-face communication with individuals from other offices. So when those groups would do their trainings, we would just move them around from each center. So one time it's going to be in the Jackson Center, and everybody's going to travel to Jackson to do that path training or whatever it was. Being genuine in the way communication is handled, and I think that that's an important thing because you can say that you're being sincere. And for example, the new director, I know he's tried to go around and maintain some of those things that I put in place, but I think the staff can tell that his heart isn't into it the way I was. He's very introverted, and it's very uncomfortable for him to just sit in a room and chat with people openly about whatever they want to chat with. I mean, that was nerve-wracking at times because I would go there and they could ask me whatever they wanted to ask me. And I wouldn't always be able to answer their questions, but you get people that are bold and they'll ask you very direct things in those meetings. So I would sit there tense at first and then just kind of ease down a little. Using a variety of communication methods, because that's what I noticed the most, is one thing is not going to work for everyone. So some people like the email, so I'll do that every other week. Some people like me to be there face-to-face, so we'll do that. And then some people like to get together like a big group. And we would do, Spring Arbor has sponsored it in the past. I don't think they're going to do it again this year, but they did that leader cast. And so every year that Spring Arbor did that, what I would do is I'd shut down our office and all the staff would go to LeaderCast that day. Because to me, that is the best training you can give those individuals. Those are great leaders that are giving great lessons all under one roof. So we would go to that, and I had more people that would the next day talk about how encouraged they were because of that. And I think as an employer, sometimes you get focused on your own way of doing things that you don't think about how you need to build and grow your team to make them better people and better employees. So using those variety methods, and then keeping your communication concise but frequent. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than when you get an email that's like 4 paragraphs long and you're like, do I really have time to read this all? So when I would send mine out, I would try to be very concise, try to keep things short. And that's what I told other people when they'd complain. They'd say, well, I hate getting email from so-and-so because they send like all these. And then we'll just tell them, say, can you make it short and sweet for me? Because that's not my best way of communicating. I don't like these long, drawn-out these emails and that sort of thing. Like for my husband, he likes phone. He wants you, like if I text him, he gets mad. So I just gotta pick up the phone and call him. But I also know that I can text my mother-in-law because she doesn't mind she doesn't mind having a text message conversation. So just learning what works for your neighbor and doing those things. Any questions that anybody has? I don't hope I didn't go too fast.
I have a question actually for both Carrie and for you. So you both did a qualitative study. Talk to us about using that methodology. Was it comfortable? Was it not comfortable? Was it, qualitative, we see quantitative is easier in some ways because it's just numbers and terms, right? Qualitative is more personal. So
go ahead.
Tell us what you think about that process.
Well, my experience was a good one. I loved the qualitative aspect because I kind of had a similar experience when I interviewed my coworkers. My topic was exploring employee turnover at the YMCA. I was afraid that because I was talking about their employer, it wouldn't be as transparent, and they were more than transparent. So it was a really good experience for me. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
I enjoyed being able to kind of dig deeper with some of the employees, and especially some of the newer ones, because like I said, I made sure I did people at different stages within their employment within the organization. So I had people that had been there for a really long time, and I made sure I had some people that had only been there for like a year, because I really valued the input from them as far as what do you think about our organization compared to other places you've been? Is this, we had somebody working for us that had always been there since the beginning of South Central Michigan Works, since the time it began. So she's really not seen a whole lot different, but I had somebody that had only been there a year, and he was very sharp, and he gave me really great feedback. And I think that's one of the things I really like too, is being able to hear someone give you that really insightful feedback. So. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you for this presentation and for your willingness to present your study. It is very important for us, for instructors, to see our students presenting. So my question is about your theoretical framework. What theories help you to understand the issue of your organization? What theory drove your research?
What theory drove my research? Well, I could tell when I became president that there was a lot of upheaval within all three centers. So my theory really was that I think when I was looking at the bigger picture, these people have had a lot going on as far as they've had a lot of change. How are we communicating with them to make sure that change is easier? So I really looked at how they were interacting with their fellow workers, how they were interacting with our customers, our clients every day. We were getting client complaints. So just looking at those things, and then my first review, it was very apparent during my first presidential review what exactly were some problems within the organization. I think that survey was probably a little bit of what started it, but also getting complaints that people weren't following through with some of the things that they were supposed to do. So that kind of set it off.
Did you find something valuable in the literature that is applicable to your study? When I say theory, it refers to the theories that already exist, in academia.
Right. I know one example too is when we were going through our HR manual, it was very vague. So the HR manual had been originally created for an environment of 15 people. 15 people that were very self-directed and did not require a lot of attention from anyone else. So when we went through that, we noticed that that's where some of the communication issues were occurring, is now we have 50 people. This was created for 15 people. We have 50 people that have been under different environments. So looking at those documents, finding out exactly what it was in those documents that was causing an issue helped us as well. And then we worked with a lawyer and recreated the entire policy manual so that it would be more effective for an organization of 50 people as opposed to 15. But I also enjoyed quite a bit of the research that when I was doing writing articles or reading the articles and those types of things. It was nice to know that we weren't the only organization that apparently has these issues. Our other articles that I would read, it was all through the board, people were saying that this was a common problem. How do we address this issue? So.
I was curious about the smart board.
Yeah.
Did you, I'm curious, you can weigh into this too, with your experience now at ProMedica. Did you find that I know it's fairly new as you were leaving, but is it on the same level of communication as face-to-face?
I don't think necessarily, because there are a little bit of delays and things that would frustrate people, or sometimes you couldn't understand everything that someone was saying, so that would cause frustration. It did cause some frustration in some areas, but if it was our last ditch, like we had to throw together a quick meeting, it was and we got to a point where we had to, with our funding, we weren't allowed to let a lot of people travel back and forth from centers. So for us, we couldn't do the face-to-face, so the next best thing we could do was do the smart board type thing.
Any experience with that, Carrie, at the Y or with ProMedica now?
Well, ProMedica has kind of been eye-opening because, especially with the communication, as an outsider prior to joining the organization, I thought, if you know anything about ProMedica, it's 13 hospitals, it's healthcare, it's huge. And I thought on the outside looking in, like, I want to work there. And I do, it's a great experience. I'm enjoying it, but I thought from the outside looking in, they're growing, they're expanding, they must be having good communication, employee satisfaction. And there's like a lot of, not bad, but a lot of lack of communication just from 13 hospitals. How do you keep it together? And one of the things they do is instant messaging. So across the system, it's not just emails or smart boards, it's also instant messaging, which I think is really good. It's quicker, it's more personable, more personal than I think even email. But I like your research a lot because it kind of the love language is the communication. If you're more of a, like the qualitative research, I would rather talk to someone face to face. And I think it'd be interesting if you took another leadership position somewhere, you know, realizing what you found going in before managing people, finding out like what their style is. Because I would probably take an email personally, then maybe someone meant it face to face.
Too many situations where I just sit down with employees and like work it out with them. That was kind of
And I don't, and this one more, like the other question I got is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yes.
I was
So,
encouraging you to do it.
we teach online, and you guys are online students.
yes.
Okay. So one of the things that we always fight is it's the communication problem you just described on a different side, right?
Yeah.
So we essentially have, there were like 6 students in your guys' cohort, so we have I had 6 branches, if you will, that I never met, never talked to. Some of our cohorts are 35. We have 35 branches that a single person's responsible for. Give us some feedback based on your experience and based on your research, and yours too, Carrie. Tell us how we can do this better as a university. Because, online learning is not going away.
Right.
So.
I chose the online learning because I wanted the convenience of it. But for me, I know it's a small thing, but I was like, another email I got to check all the time. Like, that was my biggest thing. She's shaking her head, so I don't feel bad because there's
Yes.
I was like, I already have 3 emails I have to check all the time. Now I got a 4th one I got to check all the time. So I know that's a little thing. But for me, for the most part, that's somewhere I'm comfortable in. So it was not all that challenging for me to do it that way. But I do know, for example, we have a girl working for us who's going back to school and doing online. She struggles with time management. And I find myself, she had a class that she didn't follow through with everything she's supposed to do. I'm like, your instructor gives you timelines for a reason. You need to follow those timelines. So I think if you're someone that's good at time management, if you're good at being able to juggle those different things, it's easier for you. But I can see how someone who struggles with that area, taking an online course would be very hard because you don't have someone, you think you can get away with not doing all the work, but then you realize, oh no, I need to get that turned in. So.
Do you think you would have benefited from a little bit of a blended thing where maybe once in a while you had a face-to-face Zoom with your prof or something? I had I one time in research in the MSW, a couple people, or 5 or 6 people didn't pass the classes originally. And they asked me if I would kind of help them. I helped them so they could graduate. And I kind of did a mixture of that. And I was really, I don't necessarily do it in my regular professor work, but that was really something because you'd have to turn something in like an online, but you do a Zoom the next week just to allow them some questions. See a face-to-face. I'm just wondering if I'm just asking because I just had that experience, so I'm just asking. So blended might be good once in a while. Maybe it wouldn't have to be every other week like mine was for 8 weeks, but it could be maybe once in a while.
Sure.
And I don't know, Karen can probably agree with me, but, or not. But when we went to New York, I think that was a great thing for a lot of us that were completely online students because we got to see the instructors face to face. We got to see some of our classmates face to face, even though we were there too. So and to me, that was why I wanted to make the New York trip work because I'm like, I'm gonna do this no matter what, because I knew I was already removed from it in that way where I was doing everything online, so being able to go and actually see people, meet people, it was a great experience. So yes, I see, and when I did my undergrad, I did it in the class, and I did the adult accelerator, but I did it in the class, and I saw the benefits of that. From that time in my life, this season in my life where I went back to school and got my master's, there's no way I probably could have done that in class. I mean, it would have been very, very difficult because I was doing homework really late at night and at wee hours of the morning and things. So
that's why I'm just asking you, just kind of because I wondered, you brought that up and you brought that up, and I was always, I thought this might be a good time to ask.
Well, the New York experience gives us an opportunity as the professors to hang out with the students in a way that we aren't necessarily the authority figure. So we're hanging out, we're getting on the subway together.
We're relying on them to get us to where we're going.
No, I understand. I hear what you're
There's
saying.
team building in a different way. And then what we found, because we have the MBA at the regional sites, the folks who do want that kind of hybrid learning where they can go face to face, they get to do that. Like, I think, James, you were in the hybrid.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that.
And I don't know how you guys did it. That was kind of, we don't necessarily do that. We have some Zoom stuff we're doing now. So we can put 2 or 3 cohorts together, but that's,
We do that. Ina does the Zoom quite often, and so it really depends on the cohort because everybody is different, which is kind of what you were talking about, right? If we require every professor to do a Zoom session with each student, it's going to really appeal to certain people, and it's going to turn others off. They don't want to have their face on them.
Well, one thing that I like too is that I think it was the computer course. I don't know if you had to take that one, but there was a class that was computer-based type class, and that professor, he would do like the videos every week. Huh? Yeah. And he would post videos at the beginning of each week and kind of talk you through, and I liked that. I don't know how you felt, but I did, because now you get to see your professor and you're kind of feeling like you're interacting with them even though you're not.
That's good.
But he did a great job with that, being able to posting those every week so that he was talking to you about what you were going to do that
I
day.
think, James, you have comments?
Well, no, I was just agreeing with the hybrid. I enjoyed the interaction with my fellow cohorts. We started with 7, ended with 4, but the 4 that finished the program, it was like we were a family basically. So I really do enjoy the face-to-face component of the program.
And I think you all traveled to meet with Ina, didn't you?
Yeah, Stephanie and I, we did travel. I think Stephanie may have done a couple times, but we traveled once together to see Dr.
Yeah, so meeting the needs of an individual, it's important to know what works for folks, because some people, again, they do not want to meet with Ina. She has a really hard time sometimes even to get them to open up to do a Zoom, because they don't want their face on the camera.
I understand.
But maybe they'll have a phone conversation. But I like Ina's question about what theory or concept, we're describing, because that's one of the things in qualitative research, right? That you're not really starting out with an a priori assumption, but you're there to learn and explore. And then once you get it all, then you're kind of like, what is this? What describes that? And it's okay for us to have that lingering question, but that's where we drive back to the research, and we say, what concept or theory, and maybe there's several, are we describing here? I don't know if something comes to anyone's mind on that.
I have one more question. Okay, we have time. What are key skills, knowledge, main knowledge that you learned from living case studies that you can apply in your other areas or in your work, whatever?
And I've actually talked to my husband a lot about this, because what I've noticed that he does a lot in his business is he just makes assumptions about things that are happening within within his company. And we just had to talk about it this morning when I was on my way here. He called me because of something that happened in the office right before I left, and I told him, I said, the issue isn't the way the that you want the problem resolved. The issue is the way you approach the resolving of the problem. So I think that's one thing that living case study kind of shows you is how to take a problem and kind of look at it from a full scale, take it all the way and wrap yourself all the way around it instead of just focusing and narrowing in on one thing. This is the problem. No, let's research and find out what the main problem is. So that's kind of one of the things I was trying to tell my husband this morning is, people don't have a problem with the way that you have an issue with what's going on. They don't like the way that you address them about the issue. So you need to work on changing the way you do that so that they don't feel like they're being attacked every time that something happens.
I think that's a good question too for Perry. Is it James? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, what are the big takeaway that you had from the living case study approach? Like, how's it changed your way you approach things? Is that your question?
Yeah. I think for me, I find myself thinking outside of the box a lot more. Really trying to dig deeper, to find a solution to something. I find myself actually being more open with my suggestions, where previously I may have kind of held in out of fear of that being rejected. But I'm more confident in what I know and what I'm able to apply to whatever may be presented to me.
I would say that the problem is not always necessarily the problem. That there's usually, it's like an onion, there are usually layers, and when you actually, I know in management at the Y, when I actually took the time to get past my frustration of the employees, okay, there's a lot going on, there are different layers, and I think that can be applied probably to everything in life.
This goes back to what I've always tried to tell people is act, don't react. So don't just do a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on, what you assume is going on. Take some action and find out the cause, what's really happening here. So.
You did a really remarkable job on your research. Thank you for your dedication to obtaining your degree. We're so happy you came back to Spring Arbor, so you have your Spring Arbor MBA. And let's give her a round of applause.
And